What's good, YouTube? And welcome to the house. This is a conversation I don't think a lot of you guys are gonna want to have, but I think it needs to happen from the reverb I'm hearing in the community. Whenever we got the new Master Rule update, yes, it was huge buffs to XE summoning, Synchro summoning, and Fusion summoning, but so many people were saying links are now weakened and pendulums are dead. I never have to read that 200 long card text pendulum card. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to worry about it. Where did you get this notion? I'm no expert craftsman on building 200 interruption negates best boards ever fields, but pendulums got a very huge buff from the new Master Rule update, perhaps to the point where we're going to see some crazy things from it in the future. Let's just go ahead and get into the discussion with what I think is one of the most obvious cards that also got hurt by Master Rule 4 and is now helped by the upcoming Master Rule change. Harmonizing Magician is the perfect example of an insane card that got choked out by Link summoning. You want it in your hand, but because of how Link arrows work and how pendulums have to meticulously set up their board under Master Rule 4, this got put on the back burner for a lot of people. This level 4 tuner summons another level 4 out of deck should you want, and that enables you into the most powerful synchro level in the game, pretty much, level 8, or the most powerful Xyz rank in the entire game, 4. I do dare say those are two of the most generically good levels slash ranks in the game. Harmonizing Magician is crazy good, and I think coming back into the new Master Rule, this is very good for it. Also, people are treating Nibiru as if it's some kind of god card. They're talking about, you better have your copies, it's gonna be insane, everyone's special summoning here and there and everywhere, and a lot of decks are looking like, yeah, what can I really do against Nibiru? Well, the Burning Abyss decks, they get their double Dantes off, and they're able to recoup a lot of lost value, but it leaves a lot of decks assed out. When we look at Pendulums, oh, here's a card that enables a card that stops Nibiru, and also has multiple other ways besides hard drawing it to get out on the field. I think when we look at the realistic tools and options for this deck under the new Master Rule, that it's heavily improved, that you no longer have to focus as much on placement until you're actually building your Link board, because it has access to some of the most amazing Link ones in the game, which is how Link summoning is going to continue. I think things like Striker Dragon got a lot stronger. The Guard Dragons got way stronger here because you're still able to set up your board with minimal requirements and still get very big power out of it. Here's another example. Speaking of Guard Dragons, I remember Alex Bergeron at the Pro Play Games Tour, and later this strategy did pop up in YCS Tops. I'm talking about them Draco Slayer boys, and this is a perfect example of another buff. What do? Oh, they XC summon, they Synchro summon, and they Fusion summon, and then further XC summon into rank 8s, again, one of the other most powerful ranks within the game with their tools after non-targeting destruction slash removal of the field. And they continue to resource up through the Guard Dragon engine for loops, my brother, being able to just pull into the deck. And recently in the OCG, in preparation for this Master Rule, Face Off went to 3 of them things. It's crazy to me how slept on this is, and I am seeing some people test with this, but you see the Pendulum community being very quiet and waiting. And I'm sorry if I'm blowing up your spot, by the way, if you're like, yes, underestimate me. Pendulums, in and of by far, were held back in certain strategies by the Master Rule, and we're going to see them come forward just like that, especially if we get some of the same unlimits. But ban lists are pure speculation. Let's talk about another deck that was very held back by the previous Master Rule, and that is Odd Eyes. This is the example of a deck that had it almost all there, has got continued support throughout this current Master Rule, and finally comes to a head where it can start looking for total destruction and devastation upon the metagame. It would get a rogue top here and there, and it was very exciting when it did. Its levels happen to match up with the resource game. Oh, look, there's another 7 that you get pretty much free with your Dark Worm. It really matches up well, and you're going to be able to start Xyzing stuff like Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon, leave it out on your field in a place that you don't care about so much, and then use it as a resource later to bring out a negate on board, rather than having to really worry about getting it off the field earlier for a Link summon. You can decide when and where it's going to go. You can decide what to do aggressively or not so aggressively. And when I'm looking at the future of this deck, well, we've got more support coming that, hey, you can just slap this on top of a certain rank 4 that could be summoned by this, or you can actually bother to use the tools of 2 level 7s to overlay and put it to the side. This is another example of things people might not be thinking about as much. Well, Pendulum Xyz, they get summoned to the main monster zone for their first summon like regular Xyz. Same with the Synchro Pendulums. It's very interesting, the small nerfs that people think they got could actually be turned into buffs for them. And by nerfs, it's just other decks being better for what they were. I don't get this community-wide kind of acceptance that this is a nerf because it kept from Master Rule 4 being placed to the back row and having to Pendulum summon to link pointers. Yes, because you rely on links, you have to go different routes, but they need that restriction for the power that is offered in the deck. They need that restriction, otherwise they're just running everywhere, and I think they still will be. Whenever I look at a Pendulum deck, I'm reminded of previous Nationals where they end up in the finals past everybody's expectations, and then they still just kind of sleep on it afterwards. They're like, oh yeah, that's from the Pendulum group, or that's a Pendulum player. I think because of the disdain for Arc V5, and when people are really thinking towards this, they just don't want to deal with it. They're hoping they don't have to deal with it, and that's not the way to answer a deck. You prepare like a madman. You think about siding anti-spell fragrance. You think about what you have to do past Nibiru. Like, am I running Dark Ruler No More? They could be playing Zephyr, which is a choppier engine that they don't want to run, but if Dark Ruler No More is running around, then they have answers for that as well. Pendulums are a toolbox that has one of the most insane enablers in the game for a very low commitment that they don't even have to put their normal summon towards. I'm very worked up about this, by the way. I don't know if you can tell. It's been a really long time coming for this conversation since the other weekend, and it feels like whenever I go against the grain on these conversations, I do get a bit of a pushback, but I want people to see the low commitment for the resources. These are Link 1s. These are Link's 2s that they gladly go into and end on, and now they have more freedom with their board. They have more freedom for their engines. I don't want this to be understated or missed, and I feel like the community definitely, whenever I go against the grain, like, has this immediate pushback until I explain it in depth. Like, there's other tools that I think are forgotten about when it comes to, like, the Pendulum Magician engine as well, such as extra negates on board, extra end answers that are really good against even, say, Sky Strikers here. This, with Endymion on an infield and maybe a Secret Village of the Spellcasters, what's a Sky Striker, even modern deck, gonna do? They're gonna scoop and try to get to some answers, and they may not have that within their extra deck. And it's just crazy to me how amazing these boards are set up, what they've gained access to, what's coming in the future, almost for certain by our WCQ, I would think. I think we will get this by Battles of Legend, which is hopefully before, or by our March set, which is offering tons of new cards. I think that people forget the resources that were left to the Pendulum decks, and yeah, they just don't want to deal with them. But let me know in the comment section down below if you think you have a viable argument for Pendulums actually receiving some kind of nerf from this, because I still think today, with how Pendulums evolved, maybe a modern duelist thinks that their end fields is linking up, but to me, an older duelist, I see their end fields as abusing their resources to Xyz and Synchro like almost no other deck can, well, besides Synchro Hand Loop now and perhaps Burning Abyss, which are two very powerful strategies. I think that this deck has better access to it than almost anything generically, and they'll be moving forward with it. But again, I want to hear your counter arguments, and let me know. Maybe I changed your mind in the comment section down below. You were one of those people who were saying pins are dead, and maybe your little eye opened here, or I blew up your spot. I'm sorry, you're a pin player and you already knew this was coming. Subscribe if you haven't already. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed the conversation. Of course, use that TCG player link in the description down below if you are doing any Master Rule buyouts, but I sincerely tell you every single time, wait until towards April/May to really put your green on the table, because that's going to be the WCQ format, and we have 2 ban lists to shape things up, which easily could have implications of making Pendulums even better. But that being said, it's up to you to decide the future, I guess, of how the card game is going to go, and what you might be side decking ahead of time for this insane strategy. And I'm sure we'll be hearing from the true Pendulum Master soon enough on YouTube when he tops.